Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today. This is for those just now listening. This is actually our second time recording this podcast because I didn't record the first time. Totally my fault. But Sarah, I'm super excited to talk to you again today. I actually think today's conversation will be better than our last one, just because we didn't have the time and chance to really dive into what we wanted to get into. So, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm ready for the weekend and it's only Tuesday, right?
Yeah, that's not good. Well, I'm ready for this next half hour, whatever it ends up being, and having this conversation. For simple introductions to everyone listening, why don't we just start out with what's the story of Sarah? I know your story. I think you have an interesting story, but tell us the story of Sarah, kind of like where you're from, what you've been through, and then what ultimately led you to get into what I call small town sales. We'll talk about more about what you do in a little bit, and I mean that with awesome respect. But how did you get into the sales industry, and just kind of give us your story?
So originally I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, and lived up there in Parkville, Missouri my entire life practically. And I moved to Southeast Kansas when I was 16 to move in with my then boyfriend, who's now my husband. And we have two daughters. They are 15 and 10. And so growing up, I always wanted to be in the medical field. I wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to be in just that environment. I put a band-aid on my dad for the first time when I was like 3 and said, yep, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so when I moved to Southeast Kansas, it was a complete culture shock, I guess. I made fun of the little town that we moved to originally for its whole 3 stoplights that it had in the entire town. So I think they're up to 5 now, though. So when we uh, so learning how to adapt to the small town lifestyle was not something that I took lightly, where it wasn't very easy to me because everybody down here was so nice and I was used to being very aggressive up in Kansas City even as a teenager. It just wasn't even a good environment up there for me anyway. I always had a problem with people telling me no, and I guess that you could consider that like a problem with authority, and I wasn't okay with compromise. So when I moved to Southeast Kansas, that was a whole lifestyle change for me, and learning how to compromise basically and learn more about people instead of immediately making those assumptions that, oh, they're just not nice people, for to put it lightly, I guess. So then anyway, moving to Southeast Kansas again was a big culture shock. And what I thought was bad in Kansas City, or as a teenager in Kansas City, or even as a child in Kansas City, was just kind of amplified in Southeast Kansas. You don't have near the resources or the um, availability, I guess, of things that you do in the city. And so, what do you do when you're a kid in Southeast Kansas and you're hanging around with other kids and your family's not around? You just kind of get into some bad habits. And so I did. Unfortunately, those habits followed me for quite a while, and some pretty I have an addictive personality, and so I didn't. I it became part of my lifestyle, part of my routine. Even though it's really kind of difficult to go into not a whole lot of detail because I could talk all day long. We don't necessarily have time for all that. So anyway, becoming addicted to specific things, whether it was to something that started out as innocent. So I have chronic pain, so I became addicted to some painkillers. And then again, there were some circumstances that led to some pretty severe alcoholism, but I've fortunately been past that now for several years. But with those experiences and being faced, just in a nutshell story here, with being faced of with losing everything that you've ever loved, your freedom, your family, your home, your whatever, you become very humble, and you kind of take a step back and you look like, hey, listen, there's a lot that can be done if you just compromise, and your way is not always the highway. So, or your way is not always the only way, I guess you could say. So learning how to coexist with people is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned and who I've become about, and I guess humble. I guess I don't really know how else to put it.
Yeah,
So
sure. Well, it sounds like you faced a ton of adversity, right? Going from a big city to definitely a small town. You're currently in Chanute, Kansas, which I don't know for those listening know where Chanute, Kansas is, but why don't you tell us how many people are roughly in Chanute?
just shy of 9,000 people.
Just shy of 9,000 people. Most of those people very spread out, I would imagine, too. Like, it's not like, yeah, it's just next door neighbor, some all over. So, I mean, I think knowing your story, knowing where you came from, that kind of catapulted your career into sales, which catapults you ultimately anyone who just gets into sales into uncomfortability. Which for you, uncomfortability's a familiar friend, if you want to call it, just due to the adversity you went through. Talk to me how you kind of like from a career standpoint you became a young mom early on, so you learned how to survive in that scenario. You overcame addiction, huge,
Mhm.
which we're all very proud of, and you should be. How, like, from a career standpoint, how did your career end you up at MyTown Media? Which, and maybe this is a good time to tell people kind of what you do now and how you got there.
So I worked and I've been in sales for probably, well, for about 10 years prior to working with MyTown Media. I've been with MyTown Media now for 2.5 years, and I don't see myself going anywhere ever again, aside from growing within MyTown Media. But my sales experience kind of led me to grow into, and so with my town media, I didn't even plan on being where I'm at now, I guess you could say. I saw the ad for a sales assistant on Facebook, and I applied for it because I was desperate for another job. I had worked at the same place for 3.5 years, and I couldn't stand working for the person that I had started working for. He had bought the company or the business from the first lady that I started working with, and he just was not um, he didn't have a lot of integrity, and I couldn't respect that, and so I told him to shove it. But so with overcoming adversity, that kind of, like I said, led me to realize that I'm not the only person that's going through a lot, and so I've learned that when you can talk to people and be very fluid in your conversations, or who you hang out with, or who you do business with, you get to learn a lot about a lot of people and a lot of different things. And I feel like with the obstacles that I've overcome, I have that level that or that relationship, I guess you could say. I have a lot of empathy for people. And so in my town media, that's why I love my job so much, is because I get to learn a lot about a lot. And when I meet somebody for the first time, I don't, I'm not, I'm not closed to to whatever they want to share with me. I don't just stop, you know. Um,
You're very welcoming.
Right. I don't go, when I talk to somebody, I want them to know that I'm not just there to hand them a piece of paper and say, "Hey, this is what we've got." I'm there to learn. I chose to walk into your business that day because I want to learn about you. And I feel like I'm talking about myself a lot, but I don't. I do.
No, no. Listen, this is what it's for. We want to talk about Sarah because Sarah's good at sales. But you hit on something that I think is huge. I think more so the past 12 months of doing this podcast now, one thing that has become really prevalent to me in these conversations with awesome guests like yourself is how learning has to be a core belief. And learning is a core belief of every great salesperson.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what you just said. You walk into these businesses to learn, and really make it about them, not about you. Talk to me about the like when you do like you straight up walk into a business with no contact or prior conversation sometimes. So you're in many ways kind of door to door. You're selling radio, you're selling digital, small town, town of 9,000, 9,001 on a good day. Um, so when you're walking into these businesses, I don't know, like how do you do that?
Well, we have a saying here in my town media that the hardest thing about our jobs is to get out of the car. And then the second hardest thing is to walk through that business owner's or that business's door. And we're not wrong when we say that because it's something that I struggle with. I do have a little bit of social anxiety. I this might sound a little silly, but I tell everybody that I only like people Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. That's it. And but I truly enjoy visiting with people. And so when I go in, I'm looking for that conversation. I'm looking for that, not to sound selfish, but that satisfaction to have conversation, new stimulation. I want to learn something. So when I go in and I'm looking for somebody or I'm looking for the business owner, I'm not necessarily looking for them specifically right off the bat. I want to know if you're sitting at the cash register and you're not the owner, who are you? What do you do? How long have you been here? What'd you do before? Do you have kids? Are you from around here? It's a casual conversation, and it's always surprising to me how much information people are willing to give you just by starting a conversation with them.
Sounds like you're building an ally right off the
Oh,
bat.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I that's kind of what I early on was trained was build an ally or influence the influencer. And what that means is like if you're talking to someone that's the gatekeeper manning the front desk, if you can develop a relationship with them and get them on your side, all of a sudden they might not have the final decision in the decision making process, but they have heavy influence potentially on the decision maker, and they're actually the one in that scenario doing the sale for you.
Mhm.
So if you present a solution or your product or your service to the influencer and they then present it to the decision maker, you
Mhm.
actually are removed from that sale and it doesn't feel like a sale to the DM, to the decision maker in that scenario. So
Right.
talk to me like how, I mean, so you go into a business completely cold, you meet the
Mhm.
gatekeeper, you become friends because that's what Sarah does. You're really good at becoming friends. How do you navigate that conversation to the next level?
Well, it's not something that I like to do immediately. There's a lot of people. Well, there's been a lot of occurrences where I've walked in and somebody says, to me like, "Oh, I can basically see through your BS. What are you here for? Why are you here?" And I genuinely like to show up just because I want to learn. If I've never been in your business, tell me what you do. I sat down with somebody yesterday. He's the regional director for a big company around here, and I literally told him, I said, I want to learn about what a regional director does. And so when these conversations go into, well, why are you here? What are you doing? And I'm literally just there to learn. And I'm not lying when I say that. I'm there to learn. I'll be back next week so you can, maybe tell me a little bit more about what you do. And then I can't ask questions. Um, I can't make an educated guess unless I know some sort of a little history about what you've done, what you do, where you've been, something like that. And so I take that information when people are offering it to me, and I build my strategy from that.
Hmm.
And so the next conversation that we're going to have is, okay, so you've been in this business for so long now. Tell me a little bit about why you shifted from here or what influenced that decision. And it's a very typical conversation that I think people should be having. And I have this thought process most of the time where I'm not afraid to ask questions and I don't understand why everybody else is.
I love that. I love that. So like your first conversation, obviously it stems from learning, so it's all discovery. It's
Hmm.
100% discovery, and then you take the learning from that discovery and kind of piece together. Is it safe to say like the initial strategy, and then come back to them? Like, what's your follow up look like after that initial discovery kind of conversation?
So the resources that we have within My Town Media, we have an excellent research and development team, as you know, and so I like to have them do. a little bit of research as far as what kind of demand they have or that business has in our markets or in a particular market that they would want to target. And so my favorite thing to do is to present them with information that is shocking to them. Like, did you know that there's this much demand for these services or these products that you sell or serve or whichever? And seeing the look on their face of pure shock or just not being interested is kind of, it's fun for me because I never know what they're going to do. And then that's when it's like, hey, listen, I have an idea to show you, or I have an idea on how we can move forward with this kind of strategy. Would it make sense to sit down and take 15 minutes to discuss this one day?
Hmm.
And so when they say yes, that's always a bonus to me. And then when they're a little standoffish about it, then my next part of the conversation is, well, see, this is what I can do. And this is what I would like to show you on how it would work or how it will work for you to get these people, to get my listeners to become your customers.
Is it safe to say that you like to have those conversations as much as possible in person?
Of course. Of course. I personally, I hate emails. Hate them. I hate emails. I love the face-to-face conversations. I love to read people's body language. I'm a firm believer in, this is going to make me sound like I'm crazy, but if I don't like the energy that I get from you, I don't want to do business with you.
Absolutely, energy transfers, and I think that's awesome. That's
Mhm.
awesome, and I think anyone listening should take note of that. Is if you're getting bad energy from your prospect, pick up on that and do something about it. And what you should do is run from it, because if you feel bad energy through the sales process, odds are you're going to have a horrible experience in the customer journey. And that's something that we want to avoid at all costs. There's a lot of sales entrepreneurs that listen to this, a lot of business owners that listen to this. You need to stay the fuck away from anything that any red flags you see and bad energy that you feel through the sales process. And I don't think that's talked about enough. How often, I mean, do you pick up on that quite a bit? Or, like, I mean, what are some things you look for, or maybe that are relevant or prevalent to you, I should say, that might be a red flag in the sales process?
First and foremost, right off the top of my head, to answer that, body language. I If somebody is open to me, then and we're standing and have a conversation, then they're not standing here with their arms crossed, or they're not facing toward me. You know what I mean? Or they are facing toward me. I guess I should say. Um, Now, if they're in a position like they're ready to run or they're ready to turn around, then I don't have your full attention. I don't have your undivided attention. And if you cannot give that to me, then I'm not going to beg you for it. And if it's like that multiple times, then that's where, like I said, I'm not going to beg you for your attention. And if you are offering to open yourself up to what I have to say and what I have to show you, and if you're willing to show me and teach me about your business, then that's awesome. But for those business owners or those decision makers, whoever, that are standoffish and that are not willing to show me that information, or at least physically show me that they're interested in what I have to say and they're excited about what they can tell me and what they can teach me, then absolutely, hell yeah, let's do business. But if your body language doesn't show me that right in the first 2 or 3 meetings, then
I think that's well said. Picking up on body language and the energy, learning to read the room, kind of business etiquette that's not talked about enough. And ultimately, the sales process, I believe, needs to be a collaboration. If your prospect's not collaborating with you, even or engaging with you throughout the process, I would view that as a red flag. Other red flags that I typically see are people that really just hone in on price. If you just hone in on price and you talk benefits, features, and price with your clients and prospects, it's a race to the bottom.
mhm.
And I look for scarcity mindsets. Don't want to deal with that. So I think that's well said. And that's something that only comes about after you do hundreds of conversations, have sales conversations. Day one, you're just hoping to have some sort of engagement with a prospect. Take me back to that first day that you entered the industry. Take me back to day one, Sarah. What was that like for you? Like, how did you feel going into day one, and then how did you feel after day one?
Day one, 1 o'clock, I was done. I wanted to quit. I was ready to throw in the towel. I didn't want to do it. I didn't like being told no. I didn't, but I didn't know what I was doing
Did
either.
you
I
get told
didn't
no
know.
your first day?
No, not at all. Not
Yeah.
with, not with my town media. You
Yeah.
know, it's my previous. I worked in this at a vape shop, like an electronic cigarette shop, right?
Okay.
So it's much easier to be sought for services than it is to seek out your income, because nobody is going to think, especially a business owner who's been in business for 50, 60, 75 years, whatever, they're going to immediately have the mentality of, I've been here since 1934. There is no point in me advertising. I have more business than I can handle. So like I said, working at the vape shop for 3.5 years, it's easier to be sought than it is to seek. And so when I'm going out and I'm cold calling on day one, I go into my first business and I'm trying to start this casual conversation. I'm not good with starting conversation at that point anyway. And I go in and the business owner, I'm like, so I'm Sarah with the radio station. So how long have you been here? Mind you, at that point, I'd already lived in Chanute for like 10 years and I'd never stepped foot in this business, never had a reason to. And he just kind of looked at me. He's a man of very few words as it is, and you're familiar with him. And he says, oh, since 1934. Okay, so have a good day. I'm going to choke on my foot now and walk out on the other one. That's just basically how I felt it. I was so embarrassed. And that was my very first call of the day. And I was done. I was like, oh my gosh, I felt so defeated. I was so embarrassed. I said, there's no way that I can go into another business without just beaming this embarrassment because of what just happened. Even though they had no clue, that was just what my mentality was. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is going to be like this forever. And if that's the case, I don't want to do it. I was ready to quit by 1 o'clock, but I didn't. I went home. I told my husband what was going on. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And bless his heart, he's like my biggest cheerleader. He's like, whatever, you can do this. You've been through so much worse. You can do it. If you can do half of what you've done in front of complete strangers before, then this is a breeze. All you got to do is go and tell people hi,
Yeah.
you know? And I was like, okay, so it was that shift that I needed and that mindset. And that was my problem on day one is I was in my head. And then day two, it got a little easier, day three, day four. And then when I realized that I wasn't utilizing the resources that I had, then that's when it was like, okay, I've got all of these things that I can use to make my life and make my sales process and make my job so much better. And that's another thing too, is when you don't utilize the resources that are set right in front of you to make your life better, make your life easier, that's your fault. And if you're not seeking out those resources and you're not doing things by yourself, investing in yourself to make your job, make your life, make whatever better for you, that's your fault.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say to the person in another small town selling whatever, just entering in to what I call small town sales? What would some words of advice be to that person in their first month of sales in a smaller market?
Keep going. Everybody knows everybody in small towns most of the time. And everybody might, I say everybody, some people might associate you with something else that you've done, especially if you've lived in your town for as long as you have. But
Absolutely.
you don't have to, in my opinion, coming from somebody who lives in such a small town, like I don't have to prove myself to anybody more than what I can prove to them that what I'm good at. You know what I mean? And I'm not the same person that I was when they knew me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. Just if you don't have to prove yourself to anybody as long as you can prove to yourself that you can be better than you were the day before. And that's exactly where my mentality was on day one, like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do this. I can't do this, blah, 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 And then day two, it was like, okay, day one sucked. Let's do it again. Let's be better today. So don't compare yourself to what sort of issues you had the day before. It's just the next day. And that's kind of how I've had to face everything these last several, probably 10 years or so, more than that, 12 years. 12 years, it's been okay. Day one or that yesterday was not good. Let's do it again. Let's try again today. Made it through yesterday. It wasn't very fun, but hey, I went to bed and I didn't wake up elsewhere. I was in my bed.
Yeah.
Not in that sounds awful. That sounds so bad, but it's
We
better
don't
than waking up
we
in
don't edit anything on this show either, so
oh, well, perfect.
yeah.
Perfect. So
Kidding. Um, no, I think that's good advice. Just keep going, and you always tomorrow's always a new day, especially in
mhm,
sales. Like winning is not loyal to you. So like if you want to win consecutively day after day after day, you have to wake up with the mentality that like, hey, I have to go earn it because I didn't earn anything. Nothing's given to me today, like from what I earned yesterday. So I think that's really
mhm.
good advice. Do you ever worry in a smaller market, like running out of people to like prospect?
No, not at all. Not at all. With My Town Media, we're not limited to our city limits. We have, 17 radio stations throughout the state of Kansas, a couple over in Missouri, and our coverage is very, very large. So, and then once we expanded into digital services, we are not limited to anywhere. As you know, we have a global client now. It's international. And so when I sit down and I think, oh man, I'm running out of people to go talk to, I'm not, because I can go talk to anybody. And I think there's a flawed perception from our listeners or from our business owners that, well, my location or my radio station is located out of Chanute. Well, I don't want to target people in Chanute. I want to, and it's like, okay, that's fine. Our coverage isn't limited to just the city limits. And so that's where I'm kind of keeping my mentality for myself. Just because my office is in Chanute, Kansas, and I live in Chanute, Kansas, doesn't mean that I'm limited to working in Chanute, Kansas.
Love,
So I will never run out of prospects.
love it. Talk to me about keeping deals moving and like ultimately getting a prospect and turning them into a client. One thing I've noticed is like time kills deals, time, momentum kills deals. I've noticed just by working with you in various capacities, you're really good at keeping like the deal moving forward. How do you? I mean, sometimes listen, you have a client that will run across the finish line with you. Other times you're dragging them. How do you keep deals moving and keep that urgency organic without creating false urgency? Right? Like I've seen salespeople like, "Hey, this discount ends at midnight." I hate all that shit. Um,
Mhm.
so just talk to me about like how you keep that prospect engaged and ultimately get them across the finish line.
Um, to answer your question about like the creating the false urgency or whatever, in my opinion, that's kind of like lying to my customers. And if I am going to lie to my customers, I'm going to jeopardize my integrity, my personal integrity, and therefore I'm going to just jeopardize the trust that I'm going to build with my customers. Additionally, as far as keeping that process going, I have literally had a customer tell me that she was sick of seeing my emails. And but I mean, she was one of the quickest people to respond to me. She was one of our quickest sales, not because, or not necessarily sales, but like the quickest turnaround. And she was just making sure that I was keeping in contact with her. Um, as far as keeping the sales process, the entire process organic, I always want to make sure that I provide my customers with new information. So if there is that urgency, like I have to make sure that your website gets built by this particular day, or I have to make sure that your radio spot starts on this particular day, it's because we already made that agreement. If you establish it up front, like I told you that I was going to have your website built by Monday the 1st. And here it is Friday, or not Friday, but say it's Friday whatever before, and I don't have that information, or I don't have part of the information. Like, come on, this is what we agreed on. Holding up to your end of the agreement is what's most important. What our director of sales, Bill, what he says all the time is promise short and deliver long. So if you say that you're going to have something done by that day or by a specific day, make sure it's done.
I
Hold
love
up to your end of the agreement.
promise short and deliver long. What's that mean to you?
To me, it's not limited to a like a specific deadline. I'm going to have it done by Monday the 1st. If you're going to have it done by Monday the 1st, have it done by Monday the 1st, but make sure that whatever you've done is going to produce 10 times the results that you had anticipated or that you had already promised. you know so if you say, for example, like, well, I know within, and this is kind of unrealistic, but if you say, I know that within the first month you have the potential to create 10 more customers just by building your website because of the demand that's shown in this county or this territory or whichever, then prove that there's going to be more. you know come over on the low end of things, and then and that there's a possibility of something growing outside of what you've already projected for your customer, make it a surprise. It's a surprise for everybody. That sounds kind of silly, but I don't want to say like, oh, I'm going to do this and it's going to be phenomenal and you're going to grow 500% in the first quarter. That's not realistic. I like to meet realistic expectations, and then exceeding them is that much better.
Absolutely. Yeah, kind of like,
Leaving room to exceed the expectations.
yeah, under promise, over deliver. But I like that, promise
Mhm.
short, deliver long. Good old Phil with the analogies there. And people listening don't know Phil McComb, but just an awesome sales guy that we have to have on the show sometime. That's a mutual
Mhm.
connection of Sarah and I. All right, so two last questions for you here, Sarah. And I love what you've created in a smaller market, because like you didn't allow a small market to limit yourself from a sales and a success standpoint. And for those listening, Sarah in Chanute, Kansas probably outsells a lot of people in major markets, which I think is just awesome. And another reason why I think people are going to grab so much value from this conversation. To someone that might be listening that is in a smaller territory in a smaller market, and let's say they're not brand new into sales, but they're a salesperson in a small market. What would your one piece of advice be to them? And then my second question will come after that, and it's more off topic, random. But what would your one piece of advice be to someone in a small to mid-sized territory, and how can they reach that next level of success that you've been able to achieve?
As uncomfortable as it is, going and being that door to door salesperson is the only way that you're going to learn how to get better.
Hmm.
You're going to learn from the previous door that you walked through. Well, I probably shouldn't do that again. Or that worked. I'm going to try that. And you're going to learn, the more people you visit, the more people you talk to, the more diverse your conversations will be, the more you're going to learn, the more you're going to understand how to be fluid in your conversations and how you can get along with everybody and not just this much or these people, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So,
I love that. The more hands you shake, the more money you make, type deal. And
mhm.
just getting out the car, like you spoke about earlier, and having
Yeah,
more conversations. How many people typically how many doors do you walk through on a weekly basis, would you say?
120
Wow.
people a day.
Okay, so anyone listening, 20 people a day, 100 people a week, 400 people a month, uh, times 12, you're talking to like 4 to 5 thousand people a year, right?
Easily. Yeah.
Four to
But
five thousand people a year.
right, but let me clarify something here. So when I go and talk to 20 people a day, generally I anticipate on presenting two schedules, two projections, two proposals, whatever you want to call it. And so I'm creating these 10 presentations for the following week, but including the 20 people that I visited on Monday the week before on my Monday's agenda
Sure.
as well. So I'm seeing the same people on the same day every week. We tell everybody all the time when somebody wants to argue with us about radio and that nobody listens to the radio anymore and blah blah blah, you hear the typical argument all the time. Okay, that's fine, but when we do run your radio campaigns and people start showing up because they heard it, it's because they learned through frequency, repetition, and consistency. So just like our radio campaigns, I'm going to come and visit you on the same day every week.
Huh. I love that.
So if I come in on at 9:30 on Monday morning, is this a good time to come in every Monday morning at 9:30? Or would you prefer I come in on another day at another time? It's really funny to me. I've had people give me outrageous times. Like, yeah, you can come visit me at 7 o'clock on a Thursday morning. And I'm like, okay, see you then. And I'll do it. I'll show up.
Nice.
And that's always fun for me to see that their face. So, but when I say that I see 20 people a day, 100 people a week, and so on and so forth, it's because I'm either pilfering out what doesn't make sense and creating new opportunity, or I'm visiting those people that I've already seen the opportunity in, and I'm trying to build that relationship and grow that into a business relationship.
So really, it's like 4 to 5 thousand conversations, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
this follow up is what matters in sales. I love it.
Mhm.
Awesome. That's amazing. All right. So the last question on this show, every show we do choose a random question from a random box. I have a white box and a black box, both filled with random questions. All questions are on the table. Nothing's off limits. What box would you like to choose a question from? The white one or the black one?
Let's go with the black one.
Okay. No idea what this question is. Okay. I've already asked that question on the show. That's why I put that card down, not because it was too bad. Um, what's your guilty pleasure, Sarah?
Oh, well, so I am an alcoholic and I'm an addict. Let's just get that on the table now.
Recover.
Um,
Yeah.
what?
Recovering alcoholic and addict, right?
Okay, fair. Yeah, that's right. So I've been sober for almost 5 years now from alcohol, sober from pills, narcotics, whichever, for almost 12.
Awesome.
So with that being said, my guilty pleasures are the only vices that I have in this world, and that's caffeine, nicotine, and chocolate.
Nice.
So,
Nice. Okay.
and
There you go.
music. There we go. Music. Love music. So,
I don't know if we consider that a guilty pleasure. I think that's a healthy pleasure, but
well,
nicotine and caffeine and chocolate could be debated. So
yeah.
awesome, Sarah. For those people listening right now, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure you're gonna have my first and last name on there. I kind of have a
Yeah.
funny last name, so I'll spell it out. I guess maybe I don't know. Look for Sara Hegwald, Sarah without an H. I tell everyone my name is not Sarah, it's Sarah.
Hurrah. No, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll link your LinkedIn profile in the show notes.
Okay. Perfect.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. And this has to be conversation one, although it's our second one of future conversations. So thank you for joining me here today, and we'll talk to you here soon.
Thank you for having me.